Hey guys, so we are just finished up with our exam week. It did not go to plan, but that is okay. I'm learning to roll with life a little bit more these days. What has made it into the shot today? A little YouTube behind the scenes. Okay, we're good. I just filmed a video a minute ago and my vacuum cleaner was like the main just on display. Not that I really care. I have my Trident here. All right, ready to roll. So I wanted to talk about our exam week. If you are not familiar with the Simply Charlotte Mason podcast or YouTube channel, I'm gonna put a link below in the description box to Sonia Schaefer's description. She has a 2-part video series all about the exam week, the Charlotte Mason method of testing. This was so eye-opening for me. I'm ashamed to admit that I was not aware of this before she did this video, before I found this video over the summer through a friend. And it makes so much sense and I'm so excited about it. I'm glad I found it when I did. But I'm not going to do a full recap here just because obviously the way that I interpret the video, the way that I have interpreted through some of Charlotte Mason's writings, and the way that I'm applying it to my family is different than how everybody else will interpret it or choose to do it. We're not Charlotte Mason purists around here, so I should give that disclaimer. Some of my girlfriends and I have spoken a lot in the last couple of years about that idea, and we're not completely there in our family, nor do I intend to be, because there are certain things, like I highlighted in a recent video, that I don't fully agree with or that won't work out for our family, but that is okay. It is definitely the method that we most subscribe to and love and appreciate, and the method that I almost feel like our family naturally falls into, and then the research and the writings back it up and support us versus us trying to fit into a bubble, if that makes any sense. So if you want, go ahead and check that video out or those videos out before you watch the rest of my video, because I'm not going to fully explain the whole idea of it. What I will say is that it presented the idea of exams as a way to celebrate what the kids have learned versus tricking them into getting the wrong answers, which is my experience with testing and exams. I happened to be a really great tester as a kid. I really enjoyed tests. It was something that I really loved and did well at. I can say that my kids aren't that way. One of them may possibly be, one of them I know for sure is not that way at all. When we did our portfolio review this year, I had one of my kids absolutely go blank when they were talking with their evaluator. Thankfully, the evaluator is a friend of mine, so she knew how to rework questions, but this particular child does very, very well in math and reading and couldn't remember a single book that they had read or a single, they couldn't even tell you how to tell time on a clock just under the pressure. So yes, that's something we're going to work on. I don't believe in just saying, oh, they're not good at it and then moving on, but also I'm grateful for home education because I know that we can still soar in our educational experience together without the pressures of tests. But the exams have been a beautiful experience thus far. We've only done one term, so we've had one exam week, and I'm gonna tell you kind of how I planned it, break down how I wrote out the questions, what the questions were, and give you a recap of how our first exam week went. I do expect future exam weeks to go a little bit more smooth, but this was our first go at it, and there's grace for the gaps that we missed. So let's go ahead and get into how I prepared and how I planned. So how I planned. So first things first, I wanted to make sure that we were at a certain point in each of our subjects before I gave questions on that, and I wanted to pull some questions from earlier in the term and later in the term, and also wanted all of my kids to have a different exam style, if at all possible, because they are close-ish in age. They're all 2 years apart, and my youngest is kindergarten, my oldest is 5th grade, and obviously those needed to look different. I also didn't want my middle son to feel like he was being judged up against my younger child or my older child, because he's very sensitive to that, and so I definitely wanted his to look different than the others. So I basically went through each of our subjects and I wrote down things that I wanted to be the topics or the questions. So I will go through those. This is gonna be a longer video. If you did not see the timestamp before you started watching it, go ahead, pause this, go make a cup of tea if you need to. I'm going to go through this in depth because I looked for as much information on the internet as I could find leading up to this, and I just couldn't find much. So I thought, I'm just gonna lay it all out there. I'll do that again after our second term and our last term, but maybe this will help any of you if you guys are looking for info. Not that I know it all, but you know, it's super helpful to see how other people do things. And a lot of the ideas I got were from the few websites that had specific information about how these parents wrote out questions or chose to do exam week. So yes, it's personal to each family, but it gave me some great ideas. Hopefully it does the same for you. So for science, I wrote down 3 topics. One was taste buds, because we had done the story of lentil and we did a whole unit study on taste buds with that 5 in a row book. So it was not from our science curriculum, but it was a science topic we talked about. I had predator and prey from our zoology and careers in zoology and animal careers. So those were my 3 topics for science. Now the way that I did this was for my youngest. I said, for my kindergartner, I laid out a piece of butcher block paper, and this was an idea from a friend that she found from a website, and then I actually stumbled upon the same website in my research, and so I will link that below if I can find it. But for him, he's not doing any written narrations yet, so I just wrote down his oral narrations. I'll slip some footage in here, and then allowed him to illustrate everything, because that's the way that he can express himself right now, is through drawing and through telling. And so I wanted him to pick one of those 3 topics and tell me about it. So he chose predator and prey and gave me his narration and then colored it. So, you know, he did his 5-year-old predator and prey coloring. For my older 2, I gave them these 3 topics, and for my daughter, like my 5th grader, I said, tell me about taste buds, tell me about predator and prey, or tell me about zoology, careers in zoology. I wrote the 3 questions down on 3 blank pieces of paper on a clipboard, gave it to her, gave her all the time she wanted to in her room to answer those questions. I wanted her to pick 2 of the 3. It is an open door policy. She could come and verify anything she wanted to with me. It was not like this high pressure exam, but I wanted her to write out a written narration. I wanted her to write out at least 5 sentences. And then she had room to illustrate if she wanted to. I'm not gonna cut them off from doing that at any point. I think that's sweet and fun, and they love that. For my son, I went through these 3 questions. I kind of tweaked them a little to be different than my daughter's. So for my son, it was like, what are taste buds used for? For the second question was, what is the difference between predator and prey? And then the final one was, name some careers in zoology. I again asked him to pick 2. He got a little nervous because this was our first exam. And so this is where we had our first moment where this exam week turned into such a beautiful experience. Because instead of him being against this idea, he doesn't love to write, so I thought I might have to write some of his narration, because he is a young 3rd grader. If he were going to school, he would be in 2nd grade because he has a summer birthday, so that would be my choice. Emotionally, I would put him in 2nd grade, but academically, I'd put him in 3rd. And so he, you know, written narration is difficult because sometimes their motor skills or their thought process is just not up to speed. They're a little disjointed. And so sometimes he wants to write out all his stories. He'll write these pages across the floor. He'll spread everything out. He'll be drawing these books and illustrating them. Sometimes he's thinking so quickly and he doesn't write it quickly enough and he loses thought. So I was open to whether I was going to be writing oral narrations or giving him space to do written narrations on his own. And so I was in the room with him when I started to see him become overwhelmed by these questions because he thought he didn't remember anything. And so he said, I had written down, like, tell me what taste buds are used for. And he said, I don't know any of these questions. I don't know anything about the tongue. And I was like, ding, ding, ding. This is how we're gonna get through this initial shock of exam week with him. I said, the tongue? I didn't say anything about the tongue. He said, no, taste buds. I said, oh, so you know that taste buds are on the tongue, so I think you know something. So we went very basic, and I reworked his question, and I tailored it to him, and I said, write a story to an alien who just landed from outer space, who is wondering what these humans are doing, essentially, when they're eating food. And then he was able to write this story about taste buds, what they're used for. He even remembered the word unami, which, I mean, come on. So he did know, and it was just such a beautiful experience. He felt so accomplished, and it's definitely going into term 2 feeling like he knows his stuff, and definitely excited to learn more because he can't wait to tell more based on these experiences. So then he was able to then choose the predator and prey question, and he knew it at that point. For history, I had 3 questions. I did this basically the same way of tailoring the questions differently to each child, and then my kindergartner doing this paper roll for all of these. So I'll tell you the topics I chose in history. It was tell about how the American Revolution inspired the French Revolution, tell about the Trail of Tears, and talk about slavery in America. So same thing, I modified the questions for each of their personalities, but those were the 3 topics I chose that, 3 subjects we have studied so far in the first term in history. Geography, we just did our map drill. That was easy. For reading, I did an unprepared dictation from Using Language Well for each of the older 2 kids. And then for my kindergartner, his was just read to dad. That was a fun one. I especially love that this encourages to bring the whole family in, or to use people from the kids' community. It's not just between me and them. So we involved my husband quite often. For handwriting, I did an excerpt from Girl with a Musket, which is a The Good and the Beautiful book that we read earlier in the term that Jesse loved. So that was his excerpt for handwriting. For Isabella, we did the poem Snowflakes, and which is one we had studied as well. And then for Eli, I had him write out his alphabet. He had a great time with that. And I watched them do their handwriting, make sure they were doing everything properly. My younger 2. My oldest, I just had her check her work, make sure that she was presenting her best effort. She's been pretty good about that, so I trusted her with that. For picture study, I had, for my oldest, describe the picture by Monet you most liked this term. For my son, I cut out little thumbnails of the pictures, and it said match these pictures to their titles. And then for my youngest son, it was color a picture of your favorite piece by Monet, which at that point, I'm sure he only remembered the last one we had studied because that's the one that he did. For composer, it was the same question for all of them. Tell about your favorite tell about your favorite composition by Beethoven. Wow. Let me try that again. Tell about your favorite composition by Beethoven that you have heard this term. Poetry for Isabella was tell about the village blacksmith. I like to have it open-ended for her. She goes more in depth and explores more, whereas my son, if I leave the question too broad, it will narrow his response. And so if I give him more specifics, he'll actually give me more detail. So for him, it was tell me 2 things about the village blacksmith. And then my youngest son was just tell me about the village blacksmith, and I wanted him to draw a picture. So he remembered a couple of the things about him. The reason I chose that poem was because it was my favorite that we studied last term, and so we read it a lot, and I just thought it went so in depth, and I wanted to make sure that my kids weren't missing a lot of the little points that were made throughout that poem. It's one that I feel like I could read again and again and again and pull something different from every time I read it. So I was interested in their perspective. Calendar time, probably not a typical, probably not your typical exam subject, but it is something we do every day, and I wanted my kids to have that opportunity to show that they could take on the leadership role without me directing them. And so for calendar time, I had them each lead calendar time one day. I don't have it over here. I thought I did. I had my little notebook, and I just wrote down notes of the order that they did everything in, pulled it out of my notebook, and stapled it on to the rest of their exam week stuff. So I wanted them to lead us in the pledges and the prayer and the days of the week, the months of the year, show me that they knew how to find the time, show me that they knew, you know, what day it was, what month it was. I had a blank calendar set up. It wasn't like they just flipped it over to the next day. So it was all blank. They had to hang it up there, lead us through our recitation and all of those things. And when I put them on the spot like that, they really do well and show me that they are more capable than I had even really expected. And so moving on to the second term, I definitely don't need to be giving them as much direction as I had been giving them. I think that it's offensive to them, really, to be honest, when I'm giving them direction. I think that they know and they just don't want to be disrespectful and say, I know, so they take my direction. But I found through exam week that I no longer need to give any of them direction, even my kindergartner. For the handcraft, we are quilling. And so my goal for the end of this term is to have my friend Jennifer, who is a good friend, and she's very good at the paper crafting, scrapbooking, anything, really anything crafty. So where I'm not sure that she has much experience with quilling, I know that she is the girl that I want to go over their work with them at the end of the year. So they know that at the end of the year, she will be evaluating their final project that either I give them or she gives them. But I wanted to give them a little sample of quilling on their own, which is not something we have done very well at this past term. So for Isabella, her handcraft exam was to show me 5 different shapes or sizes with her quilling, and she had plenty of time. She had all week to work on this, so she could take her time. For Jesse, it was to show me 3 different shapes or sizes. And then for Eli, his only question was, can you show me a circle? And so any shape, any size, I just wanted to know that he knew how to twist it up on his own, glue it, and put it down on the paper. Music was, they take violin lessons, so their violin teacher gave them a goal the week prior, and then she just asked them to show them the next week. For their hymn, we actually didn't do this yet because they ended up with strep throat at the end of our week. But their hymn exam, it's special because we have a very small fellowship group instead of a traditional church. And so my husband leads the worship there, and all the kids, whenever they want to, are welcome to participate. And so their hymn exam is to sing their hymn at church during our worship service. And they were set up to do it last Sunday, but because they were sick, we're gonna bump it up to next Sunday. So they haven't officially done their hymn yet, but I did have them sing it. All right, my battery died and I don't know where I was. I also just realized I forgot to turn my lighting on, so oh well, looks like it's working out fine. So I think I was talking about their hymn and the fact that they were too sick to finish. So they did sing for their grandparents, and that will have to do for now. They will get a chance to sing that for our church, but I don't think I'm gonna count it, you know, in exam week anymore. I just know that they were excited to do so. So there's that. Now this is where things started to take a turn because, like I said, they were getting sick. We actually had, I think, 2 different illnesses going through because only one of my kids officially had strep. Another one I could have sworn was coming down with it, but then didn't, and then ended up with like a regular cold, and then it lasted like, I feel like it lasted forever in our house. My plan for our folk song was to give them each a question. So for Isabella, it was going to be draw and illustrate your own version of The Green Grass Grew about a birthday cake. I thought that'd be fun. I love that she memorized that song so quickly, and so I wanted her to kind of like use that same method to do like a song about a birthday cake. For Jesse, it was to sing the folk song and illustrate the tree, and then for Eli, it was to draw a picture of all the things on the tree in The Green Grass Grew all around. We didn't get around to that. We ended up just singing it one night for John. For a Bible, it was write the books of the Bible in order by memory for Isabella, put the books of the Bible in order on paper for Jesse, and tell me the books of the Bible for Eli because he does have them memorized orally. Didn't get around to that. All these things we didn't get to. For Bible memory, it was to do the verse repetition for the grandparents. They ended up doing it for their dad at dinner one night. Habit study, we'd studied reverence, and that was the one that I chose for them. And so for Bella, it was write a story of someone displaying reverence. It needs to be at least 10 sentences. For Jesse, it was give an example of a time you were shown reverence or a time reverence, or give an example of time or a time reverence was shown to you. I mixed that up, but I think you know where I was going with that. And then Eli was tell me about reverence. Logic was to complete a mind bender, which they did on their own. I usually help them with those. For art, it was the color wheel. We ended up going to the museum earlier in that week, and the kids all got a chance to talk about the color wheel, and I listened to my oldest tell about the color wheel, and then I asked my other two afterward, because we were split in different groups, and they all told me about it, primary colors and secondary colors. So I was just like, you know, that's a good exam. And then for nature was tell about your favorite day in nature this term, or tell about a plant or an insect we observed this term. We also didn't get around to that. So there were some we didn't get around to. I'm not holding myself to do those questions again with them. I think we got through some great ones. The kids got a good test of what exam week was going to look like. I learned what to and what not to expect. And, you know, we finished our last term and tied a bow on it in that exam week, and we're just gonna move forward. So I'm not asking for a perfect portfolio here. So based on some things I wrote down, things they wrote down, I'm just saving those things to put in their portfolio. Hopefully portfolios will be really easy at the end of the school year, because I should just be able to compile their 3 different exam weeks, and that should give our evaluator a good basis on what kind of topics to discuss with them and what is in their portfolio. I'll put a link up here if you're interested in how portfolios work in the state of Florida. And then for Eli, we're gonna have these 3 really cute paper scrolls of some of his illustrations. We also, every day after we finished exams, because they only took about an hour and a half each day, did a fun activity. We painted, we made homemade Play-Doh, we did a fun fall craft, made a fun fall snack. So I just wanted to kind of wrap up each exam by celebrating our time together and the extra time we had in that day. So I threw that in as something fun for exam week, something to look forward to. I wasn't sure if it was gonna be emotionally okay for everyone, so I wanted to have that there to kind of de-escalate any tensions, but there weren't any, and it was just enjoyable. So if you guys liked this video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know if you guys do exams in your homeschool. I'd be really interested to hear that. And I'll put all the info in the description box below about what Sonia Schaefer has to say about Charlotte Mason style exam weeks. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.